Welcome to the Indie Film Hustle Podcast, episode number 156. A lot of actors talk about doing their homework, but very few of them do it. Tony Scott.
Broadcasting from the back alley in Hollywood, it's the Indie Film Hustle Podcast, where we show you how to survive and thrive as an indie filmmaker in the jungles of the film biz. And here's your host, Alex Ferrari.
Welcome, my Indie Film Hustlers, to another episode of the Indie Film Hustle Podcast. I am your humble host, Alex Ferrari. Now, today's show is sponsored by Video Blocks. And if you guys are looking for stock footage, After Effects templates, motion graphics, Video Blocks is the site, man. I've been using them for years now. I use some clips of theirs in my movie This Is Meg for some stock footage. And this month alone, they're launching a new crazy collection of hundreds of new Unreal clips, including space, virtual reality, deep water, fantasy, and sci-fi footage. All of that comes free with your subscription, and it is a limited time. And you also get free 4K clips with your membership at no cost. And Video Blocks is now giving you 7 days of free downloads. Download a ton of stuff for free. Check it out, see what's going on with it. And remember, whatever you download during those 7 days is yours for free, royalty-free forever. So definitely give them a shot. So head over to videoblocks.com/indie, I-N-D-I-E. That's videoblocks.com/indie. Today's show is also sponsored by Digital Box Office. Now, Digital Box Office is a global provider of streaming movies, television, and all sorts of original content. DBO provides a dramatic new opportunity for indie filmmakers to gain previously unavailable global exposure and valuable analytics. Now, the service is going to be a data mine for Hollywood and for indie filmmakers, as Digital Box Office users are required to vote on the content that they watch on the platform via DBO's proprietary single one-click voting model. Now, you can submit your film today at upload.digitalboxoffice.tv, and you can browse their current selection at www.digitalboxoffice.tv. You can also download the app for ISO or Android at the Google Play and Apple App Store. So today, guys, you are in for a treat. I want you to prepare to get your minds blown. I released a course, I think last week or a couple weeks ago, called the Hollywood Film and Television Directing Masterclass that our guest today taught. His name is Gil Bettman. And Gil is a teacher over at Chapman University. He's a film professor there, and he's also been a director for over 3 decades, working on some of my favorite shows of the 80s, doing a ton of different movies, television shows, music videos, commercials, just tons and tons of stuff. And the man has written 2 books, First Time Director, How to Make Your Breakthrough Movie, and Directing the Camera, How Professional Directors Use the Moving Camera to Energize Their Films. Both books are extremely highly recommended, and I will be putting links to everything we talk about in our show notes at indiefilmhustle.com/156. And Gil came to my attention when I was kind of trolling the internet looking for cool film courses, and I came across his DVD. And when I took the course, I was blown away, and I had to bring it out to you guys at the Tribe. So we teamed up to release the course. And I got to tell you, it is honestly one of the best directing courses. It has nothing to do with actors. We have great acting courses and directing actors and things like that courses. But as far as it's just a pure cinematic directing course, this is by far the best course I've ever taken. And if you read the reviews of the course on our course page, you'll see why. People are kind of blown away by it. He talks about how to use the camera to do moving establishing shots, how to cover dialogue with a moving camera, and how to shoot an action sequence. And we also talk about in this interview, as well as in the course, how insanely easy it is to add a tremendous amount of high production value to your action movie by creating a foot chase. Just like the legendary foot chase in Point Break, starring Patrick Swayze and Keanu Reeves. And it adds so much production value. It's so easy to do. And I'm like, well, next time I'm shooting an action movie, I'm obviously going to be doing a foot chase. It's pretty insane. And we go actually pretty in depth about how to do it in this podcast. But At the end of the episode, after our interview, I'm going to give you guys a special link to download the course at almost 50% off, just because you guys are loyal listeners and members of the tribe. Oh, and by the way, did I happen to mention that Gil worked very closely with Robert Zemeckis for years? And we talk a lot about Robert, about how they worked together. They literally met each other at a film festival prior to, Robert Zemeckis even shooting Used Cars, which is before Back to the Future and his amazing career. And we talk a lot about what he learned from Bob and what he learned from working with him for so many years. But, without any further ado, guys, I just want you guys to get ready to take some notes, because this is going to be a pretty mind-blowing episode. So enjoy my conversation with Gil Bettman. I'd like to welcome to the show Gil Bettman, man. Thank you so much for joining us on the show, man.
My pleasure.
I appreciate it, man. So can you tell us a little bit about how you got started in the business?
I got started in the business in the days when television was much more action-oriented. And I worked initially I was at UCLA, and out of UCLA, I got signed to a contract at Universal Studios. It was a contract to write, produce, and direct.
Can you imagine?
Yeah, I know. It was the 7-year slave contract. They owned everything I did for 7 years. It was sort of a leftover from the days of Easy Rider, when
Spielberg
the studios,
got it. Yeah.
The studios sort of thought, well, maybe there's these kids that we can get them young and sign them, and they'll turn into Spielberg.
Right, because Spielberg got that same. He signed that same deal.
He signed the exact same deal a couple of years before me.
Right.
So yeah.
So then you worked in television for a while?
I worked initially for this guy, Glenn Larson, who was the executive producer of Galactica, Knight Rider, Fall Guy, BJ and the Bear, Sheriff Magnum, other shows that didn't make it. But he and Spelling and Cannell were the three big television powerhouses with like multiple shows on the air. And so I did his post-production for 3 or 4 years, and then I threatened to quit unless he let me direct.
Nice.
Yeah. And so I started breaking in, directing. I did a couple episodes of BJ and the Bear. And then I went on and directed Knight Riders for him. And that was, so I started out in episodic television doing the hour-long stunt series, which was a very good training ground, because the schedule and the budget are hard to make. You've got to really be disciplined and know how to move a big team and command respect. And it was also and how to get how to shoot action efficiently, how to do everything efficiently. Because you have 7 days to shoot 55 pages with 10 pages of stunts.
Oof.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
It was, but the good news was that the crews were great. The stunt guys, the grip camera, electric, because these were guys that could have been working on features, but they preferred to work in television because it was a steady job.
Would you agree that television crews are some of the top end technicians around?
For that reason, there's the guys, all the guys that I worked with were because then I did music videos and then I did low budget features, and I shot a feature in Dallas, in 18 days.
God, back then, Jesus,
with a crew for $600,000 was our entire budget, and the crew, for example, the DP was the lighting gaffer on the TV show Barney.
Oh God, yes.
Which was shot out of Dallas, but he was not an experienced DP. He did a good job, but those crews, the low budget, indie, low budget feature crews were not anywhere near as good as the TV crews I worked with, which, because those guys, they could have worked in features, but They wanted they wanted to get on a series that went 3, 4, 5 years, and then hey, with the money they made, they could put their kids through college.
Right. It was a different time. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
Yeah,
it's definitely a different time. Now, I heard through the grapevine that you had a hell of a mentor. His name is Robert Zemeckis, a little-known director. How was it having Robert Zemeckis as your mentor?
It was wonderful. I mean, he's a genius, so I got to work, for years with a genius. And initially we were just, we were friends.
Mm-hmm.
We met at a film festival, the Broadway Film Festival, which doesn't exist anymore because they had a little film festival here in LA. He won a prize. I won a prize. During the screenings of the films, I kind of wandered out, ran into him in front of the popcorn machine at the Press Theater.
Of course.
And I said, I loved your movie. He said, I loved your movie. And then it was, and then we became friends. And the kind of the good news was that was the basis of the relationship. We were just meeting, and because we loved movies, we loved talking about movies. And what happened actually was that he got married, and his wife was, and my girlfriend, the woman I were living with, were friends. Mm-hmm. So, and your wife organizes your social life,
Yes, I'm married.
So yeah. so when Zemeckis was, when he was breaking in, when he was doing all of his, when he made Back to the Future, when he made Roger Rabbit, I was like hanging out with him, socializing with him.
Yeah, because he was your friend. Yeah, and you met him before he was Robert Zemeckis.
Yeah, I met him exactly, and
before used cars, before any of that stuff.
Yeah, and then I guess just to complete the story with Zemeckis, when he got the power, he said to me, "I'm going to do for you what Spielberg did for me. I'm going to get you a studio movie."
Mm-hmm.
And that was like 1990, early 1990s. And so, I spent 5 years in development with him. We developed 2 projects, one at Universal and one at Warner Brothers. And he was the producer. I was the writer-director. And we had the first project we directed was called Car Crazy, and actually sort of in various other iterations, it went on to become the Fast and the Furious because Universal owned it.
Mm-hmm.
But again, we developed these movies, one of them at Warner's, and then the other one was a project we developed one of them was Universal, one of them was at Warner's, and the one we developed at Warner's was a script that was written by Phil Hartman,
mm-hmm.
who was, one of a comedian who was.
He's amazing. Yeah,
a regular on Saturday Night Live. And that script that we developed with Hartman was, it was, that was amazing because to develop a script that I was going to make as a director with Bob Zemeckis and Phil Hartman, it was like I was in the room with genius.
Sure, of course. But from what I read, it didn't pan out as many Hollywood stories don't.
Yeah, it didn't. The movie, that script that Hartman wrote was brilliant. It was hysterical, but it was a black comedy,
mm-hmm.
and it was weird because every creative person who read the script, every director, every actor, every casting director, mm-hmm. every producer, every director, they all loved the script, and every studio, Warner's passed on it, and then we shopped it to, all around town,
mm-hmm.
and everybody, all the executives that we shopped it to, Mike Medavoy, Joe Roth, Bob Shea, which was Shea ran
mm-hmm.
New Line, and
sure.
and they all hated it. Because black comedies are, your hero is a mess,
mm-hmm.
A big hot mess, and they just it makes them really, it really just, they can't quite get it that the studio was, that the audience is going to love this guy, despite the fact that, his life is a mess.
I gotcha. So you in your day, you've worked with plenty of actors. Do you have any tips on working with actors, especially for first-time directors?
Hang out with your actors. The best thing to do with the actor-director relationship works if the actor trusts you, if he looks up to you and thinks that you have insights. And the way to get that trust is to find something that you and the actor both love. Whether it's and it's a sort of an avid pursuit of yours and the actors. It can be, well, I mean, so with guys, if it's a guy actor,
Mm-hmm.
you can always talk to guys about women. But it doesn't have to be women. It could be baseball.
Yeah,
it could
sure.
be if you're a Dodger fan and your actor's a Dodger fan, find out and talk about the Dodgers and show him how much you know about the Dodgers, because then that becomes the basis for him saying, this guy, is bright and perceptive, so that when you give him a direction, he's going to respect it,
So build that relationship as much as you can prior to actually getting on the set, and then also during your shooting.
It's prior, and so socialize. I mean, go again. Find out what they like to do. Do they like to bowl? Do they like to shoot skeet? Do they like to play tennis? And do that with them.
Got it.
Because then you will have this bait, because bottom line is, when you're directing and it's on the set and you're in front of the cameras, they're terrified. Even
Right.
the best ones, and they will listen to anybody who they think can help them deliver a better performance, right? So basically, the honest truth is, most of the time they're only listening to themselves. Most of the time they're saying, the director really doesn't know my process. I mean, most good professional actors are actually now kind of almost surprised when a director tries to give them direction, because they're used to coming on sets and having directors be mostly focused on the camera.
Right.
And I mean, even Zemeckis says, if I want an actor to be happy, I tell him to be happy. And if he's too happy, I say, not that happy, less happy. And how he does it is between him and his shrink, and I don't want to get involved.
That's a great line.
So all of the whole thing about being a method director of method actors, Zemeckis throws out the window, and basically because he can work with Tom Hanks, he can work with Tom Hanks and Meryl Streep. So
Denzel Washington. I mean, the list goes on and on.
Yeah. And I've heard other directors talk about, like, directing Robert Duvall. And somebody told me, this woman who directed Robert Duvall in the movie said, every now and then I used to try to throw a crumb over the wall, because guys that are that big, they don't want direction,
Right.
I heard Coppola being interviewed recently about working with Brando on The Godfather. That's what he said.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It must have been. It was brutal. I know that story.
Yeah, but in any case, the actor is out there, and he will listen to you if he thinks that what you're telling him will help him.
Now, how do you tame an actor that's chewing up the scenery, as they say?
You tell him to feel it, but not show it.
Okay.
That's it. I mean, just say, feel it, but you're showing me too much,
So a little bit more internal as opposed to a little bit, and so more cinematic performance as opposed to a play.
Yeah. I mean, there's another thing about directing actors. the simpler, the better. You know, it was because I acted for 5 years.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
When I got out of UCLA, I studied acting, and then I joined a theater group, and I did exercises. You know, we met weekly. We brought in scenes. We put on a play. We rented a studio, and we rented a little theater in Hollywood. We put on a play. Because I thought, okay, if I'm going to direct actors, I need to know their process. I need to stand in their shoes, right? So I went the whole way. And you know, what you discover is that when the director says action, you can only think of one thing to do, because you're trying to achieve your objective. You're trying to be, you know, that's the main thing. And you can't think about a lot, because if you start thinking about a lot, you get out of character, you get out of the moment. So if the actor's chewing up a scenery, the fewer words you can use when you give an actor direction, the better.
So the George Lucas school, faster and more intense.
Yeah.
Almost.
Yeah, but even if you're not doing faster and more intense, which is, you know, result directing, which method actors, you know, will accept, because believe me, you know, if you're George Lucas, they'll listen to you.
Right.
But even if you're using method acting and method directing and saying to the actor, you know, seduce her, or, you know, make him leave the room, or get him, you know, break him down, you know, make him cry. If you say make him cry, you know, it just keep it. That's a method direction. You're giving the actor something to do, you know. Even if you use that, you want it to be absolutely, you know, make him cry, you know.
Something simple.
Yeah, get her to hug you.
Very cool. Now, and this is something I always have a problem with everybody, like all our listeners and stuff, and independent filmmakers I talk to, is, you know, a lot of them just say, hey, I'm just going to be a director. I don't need to learn anything technical. I don't need to know about the camera or the lens. That's somebody else's job. Can you please explain why it's so important for the director to understand the camera?
Well, the main reason is because, you know, the visual side of directing has become much more complicated recently, because it's now the language of film demands that the camera be moving more than it's not. If you look at movies, you know, I mean, if you look at Woody Allen films 20, 30 years ago, the camera almost never moves. If you look at Woody Allen films today, the camera is always moving. That's because the language of film is a language, and languages evolve. We don't say, wherefore art thou Romeo, which doesn't mean where are you Romeo. It means why are you, who are you Romeo, or why are you Romeo. So language changes, film language changes, and now film language is part of film language is a moving camera. And it's complicated. And if you step on the set and expect and don't know how to move the camera, then you have surrendered you've surrendered the visual part of the visual storytelling element to the cinematographer. And that's, then the movie that you're going to make is not the movie that you have in your head. And you will have surrendered a huge part of the control to the cinematographer. You have to know as much about visual design as he does, because that way, you know, he can challenge you, you can challenge him on an equal footing, and neither of you will be intimidated, and you will make a better movie.
And basically, being a working director today, you need to have that skill set. It's not like the olden days where you could just walk on a set with a bullhorn and a monocle.
No. Yeah, but specifically because again, well, there's two reasons. One is if you're working professionally and you're starting out, usually, when I was doing episodic television, I remember the cinematographer on Knight Rider was Fall Guy. It was a guy named Benny Coleman, and he was 82 years old.
Wow.
So, and I was 27. So you go and the crew, when you direct in television, the DP, it's his set. It's the showrunner's set, and after the showrunner, it's the actors, it's the star's set, and after the star, it's the DP's set. And it still pretty much runs that way. So if you have a guy who he's controlling the set, and he doesn't, you can't stand up to him and show him as much about this as he does, then he's just going to walk over you. Which
brings me to my next question. What, as a director, do you do when you have hostile department heads or actors or any crew on set that you have to deal with? Like, what are some techniques that you use to kind of deal with that? Because it happens to all of us.
Yeah. Well, number one, you try to diffuse every possible conflict. You try your best to always, there's two ways to hunt the bear. You can hunt the bear with a gun, or you can hunt the bear with honey. And the best way is always to hunt the bear with honey. So, yeah, I just was talking to a friend of mine, this guy Andy Lane, who's now a professor at Chapman, where I am, and he had a company called Crawford Lane. He made Valley Girl. He was the producer and the writer of Valley Girl.
Nicolas Cage back in the day.
Yeah. He found Nicolas Cage. So he now teaches at Chapman like I do, and I posed this question to him, and he said, you make that person your best friend. And down that can be, and I saw Zemeckis do that. I saw Zemeckis. I would be in a room with Zemeckis, and we would be calling a studio head to ask him to give us to look at one of these projects and do a negative pick, to pick it up and turn around from another studio. So he would talk about these guys in the most incredibly negative terms, you got the feeling that if he saw the guy getting hit by a car, he'd walk away.
Okay.
And then he would get on the phone, and in 20 seconds he'd have the guy laughing. I mean, he would just charm it was. He knew his kids' names. It was like just do a complete snow job, He was a master. Yeah, and with actors, I can tell you, with actors, there is in a way with actors in particular, if you get on a negative basis with the actor, you really are in trouble because he or she will stop listening to you. If they don't like you, if they think this guy's a prick, I mean, really, you'll give them direction. Because that's their job. They have to stand there and listen to you, And then what's going on in their head is this jerk doesn't know how I work, and all right, I'm going to nod my head yes, but I'm not listening to him. Then you say action, and they go and do something. They do something that's not anything like what you asked them to do,
It's like dealing with a child.
Yeah, well, basically, and then that bottom line is, unless you fire them, that's the end of it. You've lost them,
Right.
So with actors, you've got to hunt them with honey. You've got to try to make them, like you and trust you. And if it goes south,
it's hard to get back.
Yeah, it's hard. Now with cinematographers, then, or I found out that like we're working low budget. Sometimes your cinematographer or your first AD or are not, or your UPM are undertrained and not on the top of their game. In which case, you just have to know enough about their job to do it for them. You have to step in and you say, I put the 30 millimeter lens on it and put the camera here, I mean, and if for example, I know a lot about lenses and a lot about composition. I can't tell the director how to expose. I don't, but if I did, it would be better because, if things go, if a guy starts to.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
Not have good ideas, right? And because he's not very creative or talented, then you have to make him do your ideas, right? And if he's not, and if he's going to be kind of a prick and ornery and say, I can't do that shot, then you have to know. You say, yes, you can do that shot.
And this is how.
Yeah, this is how. Yeah,
I've done that. I've done that multiple times. Yes. You have to. It's a game of psychology almost. It's a chess game sometimes. If you have someone who's trying to undermine you or doesn't trust you or something like that, and it's tough. It makes the job a lot more difficult without question.
I had a cinematographer on an episode of BJ and the Bear stand there on the set and say in a very loud voice, "So that's where you want me to put the camera?"
Right. It's very passive aggressive.
Yeah. So you just have to kind of, you have to be, you say, yes, that's where I want you to put the camera. And here's why,
and stick to your guns.
Yeah.
Now, so we've talked a bunch about actors and set, but let's talk a little bit about camera, which is what you've been focusing most of your books and career on in recent years. Can you talk a little bit about the three kinds of camera movement that from your book?
Yeah. Okay. So this is actually in my book. I call this Bob's rule. Because this was, again, Zemeckis, this is the example of like what you get when you work with a guy like Zemeckis, because not only does he know how to do it right, but he knows why that's the right way. Zemeckis he's totally right brain and left brain, but he loves understanding why things work and how they work, which is, for example, why he has his own jet and he's a pilot, because he likes the technical challenge. He likes which is why he got very heavily into motion capture and anything that's a new technology. He's kind of got this research scientific side to his personality. So he noticed, all directors that you can name going back from D.W. Griffith up through James Cameron, even you're talking about big budget James Cameron, mainstream, or you're talking about indie, art film, Coen Brothers or Oscar Fajardi or Pedro Almodovar, any of those guys. They all only move the camera in a way so that the audience is not aware of the camera movement. All camera movement becomes invisible. So if the audience becomes aware of the camera movement and says, "Oh, look at that camera move," then you've shot yourself in the foot, because, and that's why everybody does it this way. They do it because the way that film works is that the audiences come there to be sucked into the story. What your job as a director is to do is to make them believe, to make them forget that they're watching a movie, to make them start living through, to become Luke Skywalker, to become Don Corleone. You want them to be drawn into the story, to so much that they forget that they're watching a movie. And if they see a camera move, then it's almost like seeing the microphone come into the shot.
Right.
It says this isn't real. This is your actors standing in front of a camera saying lines. It's not. It's not Don Corleone. It's Marlon Brando. Blah blah.
So how do you like kind of go back and forth between that and now the camera always has to be moving?
Well, when the camera's always moving, you have to keep it moving in a way so that the audience does not see the camera move. There's three kinds of camera movement which are always invisible. And do you want me to tell you the detail?
Just you could just go over it really quickly on those three.
All right. There's three kinds. There's what I call externally generated camera movement. Then there's internally generated camera movement, and there's moving establishing shots, which is basically, because these are the ways that you can move the camera, and the camera is always moving with the story. So if it's an externally generated camera move, it's because the focus of the story is moving. If somebody is driving, the example I use is Tom Cruise driving his van out of Philadelphia in War of the Worlds. Okay. And it's a shot that Spielberg did that goes on for like 5 miles.
It's beautiful. It's a beautiful shot.
Yeah. If he's driving down the freeway, his kids are freaking out and he's trying to calm them down and tell them what's happening. And so there's this shot that, without cutting, goes on for 5 miles. Well, it's because the camera has to be moving as fast as the van, because if it's not, the van's going to go out of frame. It could be a move that long, which is 5 miles, or it could just be, the bad guy puts some poison in somebody's drink, and that could be, like the move could be 5 inches. It's the same thing. If the camera doesn't move, the poison, the hand is going to go out of frame. So that's the most kind of commonly used, invisible camera move. It's externally generated. Now, sometimes you have internally generated camera move, which is like what the center of the story sees or feels. And if it's what the center of the story sees, it's a moving point of view shot. So the shot that precedes it is a shot of a person, and their eyes are moving, and they can be just like, if you have a guy have a soldier in a trench watching a tank, watching the bad guys go by. The only part of his body is maybe his eyes that are moving, right? But if his eyes are moving, you cut from his eyes moving to a pan of the tank going by. And the audience will understand, okay, the camera is moving because the person who was doing the scene is moving, right? Or it can be somebody walking down a hallway. You cut to their eyes, then you cut to their point of view walking down the hall, going into the dragon's lair,
Got it.
Or it can be it could be Spider-Man flying. If he sees Spider-Man and you're tight shot on his face and he's flying, then you cut and you can have a point of view of the ground flying under you, and the audience will understand that the camera is flying through the air because that's what he sees.
And how about the moving master?
But there's the third kind. The moving establishing shot is if at the beginning of a scene, if you in one location, you're in one location, and then you cut and you're in a new location, you can move the camera, you can fly the camera around like Tinkerbell. It could be, you can cut to a casino and you can be up in the rafters with a drone and fly through the whole casino and end up on your hero at a blackjack table, right? But the audience will understand that if it's a new place and they haven't been there before, the camera is just moving to show them everything that they need to see to understand what happens next.
So that opening, that restaurant shot, that 9-minute restaurant shot on Goodfellas, is a great example of a moving master.
Yeah, well, that's a moving master that basically that does one thing that a moving master does, which is try to eliminate edits.
Yes.
Because there's 5 things that you want to do when you move a camera. There's 5 tasks that you need to fulfill, and one of them is to eliminate edits, because moving shots are the difference between a moving shot and a static shot. Basically, the way that it looks.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
There's 2 ways that moving shots look different from static shots. Number one, static shots can't last more than 5, 6, 7 seconds because they run out of information. You're looking in one direction. If it's 2 people talking to each other, you're looking at one person. They say something. Now this person says something off camera. You got to cut to the reverse. Or, but just think of it. If the camera's only pointed in one direction, then your movie's going to end up looking like a play, like a piece of theater.
Right.
But if you move the camera, you can eliminate. You can shoot the entire movie without an edit. Moving shots can like Russian arc or rope. Right? Moving shots can be used. The shot that we described of Tom Cruise leaving Philadelphia in his van, getting away in War of the Worlds, that shot goes on without a cut for like 2 minutes. And those are these famous oneers, like the shot of Ray Liotta walking into the Copacabana in Goodfellas. Those are these kind of moving master shots that kind of, when it comes to eliminating edits, go all the way to the point where they don't just eliminate some edits, they eliminate all the edits.
And that's, if you could pull that off, it's very efficient.
Well, it's efficient, but it's also the reason if you do a shot that goes on that long, like the shot of Liotta walking in to the Copacabana, or what's the other? The famous ones are
Touch of Evil, Player.
The Player, the opening of the Touch of Evil, Snake Eyes, Nicolas Cage, etc.
Right.
Yeah, those are. If you go that far, like the shot, I know if the shot of Cruise driving out of the Philadelphia in War of the Worlds, that shot must have cost $1 million or more because it's all CGI. It's all, the only thing that's real in that entire shot is the van and the actors sitting in it.
Right.
Everything else has been added in post, which is a huge expense and not particularly efficient.
No, I actually just saw behind the scenes of Michael Bay working on Transformers, and they had a new gimbal of some sort for the camera that did something similar to what they did in War of the Worlds, but they did it practically.
Yeah.
Which is insane. But there's just so many different ways to move the camera now.
That gimbal and those technicians
cost
a ton of money.
Absolutely.
So in a way, those big long oneers are the one that I sort of point to often is the one of Travolta walking into Jackrabbit Slim's in Pulp Fiction.
What a great oneer.
Yeah, it's a great oneer, but Tarantino didn't do that in Reservoir Dogs. Why? He didn't have the money,
Right.
So as soon as he got the money and the schedule and the budget, he did it. And he did it because, Tarantino, he wants to show he can do what Hitchcock could do, what Orson Welles could do.
Sure.
Yeah, with Scorsese. He wants to show, and that's what those big long oneers, which are really not that efficient, show. They show that's what I call directorial bravado. And if you get that kind of stuff, I mean, you're saying I'm as good as the greats.
I could pull this off.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's Paul Thomas Anderson, the shot at the beginning of Boogie Nights, So those are, But but going back to if you're shooting low budget, no budget, right? You still want to eliminate edits because that's, if you do a master, the shot should play in one shot without a cut for as long as possible, because then it will have if it's eliminating edits, if it's playing in one piece, it's going to have that contemporary aesthetic of a moving shot.
Got it. Now there was another thing. I actually, one of the reasons we actually met is I found your course online, the Hollywood film directing course, and in that course, after taking it, the one thing that I just was blown away by was the way you discuss foot chases and breaking down how you can get so much production value out of a foot chase. And it's fairly cheap to do, but it creates a tremendous amount of production value. And you use Point Break, which is, one of the all-time great foot chases. So can you talk a little bit about how important a foot chase is sometimes, just to give you a good amount of production value if it works in the story?
Yeah, your foot chase, is your low budget, no budget director, filmmakers kind of way to create an action sequence which can have as much tension and as much spectacular action as any car chase in The Bourne Identity or whatever. It's that because instead of having moving cars, you have moving people. But the difference is that that's you need a crew. You need 100 guys and 50 cops to do moving cars. To have two people running one after the other, you need nothing. What you need is two guys, two actors, or two doubles who can run, and you need a cameraman who can handhold the camera and run. And then actually, if you look at Point Break, what saves what she did, what Catherine Bigelow did there, which is kind of the secret, is you run your two guys or whatever through as many narrow spaces as you can find, and you shoot it with the wide angle lens, the 10mm lens, on what's called a pogo cam, and a pogo cam is simply a plate with the camera can be bolted down onto, with a pole about 2 feet, in length, and a weight at the bottom of the pole. Grips make these things in their backyard. If you put the 10mm lens on and you handhold it, you get a good shot, which actually, is not, it's jittery, but in a way that's only enhances the energy of the shot, right?
Right.
If you use the wide angle lens, you generate in narrow spaces. What happens is you generate a huge amount of energy, because whatever the walls, the way that you do it is the walls going by the camera as you chase after the chaser or the person being chased, generate a huge amount of energy as they whip by the camera. And the beauty of it is that everything is in focus. Right. You're shooting with an incredibly wide lens, so what you're framing can stay in frame. It's anybody can do these shots. Okay. The other secret that you've got to follow, so it's basically wide angle lenses in narrow spaces, and you with a 10mm lens, you'll get a huge amount of energy. The other trick that you have to follow, that if you look at the Point Break chase, is that you shoot each participant in the chase in a separate setup. You don't do tie-in shots. You don't do shots where you see both of them. And the reason for that is that if you took two guys and you did a two shot of them running 100 yards, right? And you saw it, if they ran the length of a football field and you did it in a panning two shot, that shot would last for 10 seconds. It would take them 10 seconds to go from one goalpost to another.
Right.
But if you shoot them in separate setups, if you don't shoot the time, if you shoot usually the way you shoot it is you shoot the leader from behind, and so you're following the leader and you're leading the follower with a 10 millimeter lens. Okay. So what you can do is if your first shot is the leader crossing the 10-yard line.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
Then you cut back to the follower, right? On the going under the goalpost, right? Then when you cut back to the leader, he's at midfield,
right?
And then you cut to the follower, and he's at the 30-yard line. Then you cut back to the leader, he's in the end zone, and so there's 3 or 4 cuts there, and so each piece, so you can get them from one goalpost to another in 2 seconds.
And it's a lot more. It's a lot more vibrant.
It's montage generates energy in itself, and if you have them in separate pieces, you can telescope them, accelerate them through the geography, through the locations that they pass through.
And that's why Point Break is so brilliant, because you're going through houses, inside of houses, outside of houses, jumping fences, till you finally get to that kind of football field, which is the LA River.
Right.
But by the time you get there, it's pretty much almost at the end of the chase. But all the cool stuff is just jumping in and out, breaking through windows. It's so energetic. It's really a brilliant foot chase.
And the hero, the person who is whose stellar work is really made that chase what it is, was the location manager.
Because that's a lot of releases you've got to get.
But it's not so much that. It's what you need to do is I'm sure they did that chase in Venice. And what the location manager did was he found all of these narrow little passageways that we're kind of adjacent to each other, because once you unload your crew and you off of your truck, you want to shoot as much as you can before you load back up and move somewhere else, because when you're shooting the way people running shooting with a pogo cam, you get take 1, take 2 is it, that's it, you've got it, and then you move on. You shoot, you shoot out your locations, and then you've got to, but you want to be able to have these narrow passageways, be walking distance, so you don't have to load up on the truck. You can just keep shooting from one to the other to the other. Now the thing about when they're not in a narrow space, when at the end of that Point Break chase. At the end, you've got to get them into the LA River. It's actually Bologna Creek in Culver City. But it's this big, huge concrete storm drain, of which there are dozens in LA. And the reason for that is that's where Keanu blows out his knee. And they planted that he has a bad knee. So if you have a chase between your protagonist, your hero, Keanu, and Swayze, your bad guy, although he's a lovable bad guy, if the hero loses the bad guy, it has to be for an absolutely rock solid, inevitable reason. It can't be cheesy. You know what I mean?
Right.
The plot turns on it. So they set up that Keanu has a bad knee. So now what the obstacle that Swayze can get past, that Keanu can't get past, is the 12 or 13 foot straight down drop from the ledge of the storm drain to the bottom. So Swayze goes off of it, manages to do that drop, and I got to tell you, I wouldn't try and do it.
Right.
He does it, because he's supposed to be a top athlete. Then Keanu comes along behind him and blows out his knee and loses him. Okay, but now what happens often is when you're doing a chase is you can't do the whole thing in narrow spaces. They had to get them to that wide open space of the Bologna Creek in the storm drain, when you get into a big wide open space, instead of using the 10 millimeter
Use
lens,
the long, right?
you use the 100, 150, 200, and you have them run on the x-axis. You have them run across the frame, and you shoot them with that long, narrow lens, and that accelerates the motion.
And it adds a tremendous amount of production value to a low budget film.
A foot chase, it's your low budget filmmakers kind of go-to way to add big production value to a low budget movie. If you Slumdog Millionaire is probably the one of the better examples, because I don't think Danny Boyle had a lot of money on that movie. And so what does he do? I mean, he does this amazing foot chase right at the beginning of the movie, because it's just the audience has come to be entertained, and an action sequence is entertaining, and a foot chase is the cheapest, easiest action sequence, and it can be just as powerful as something that costs millions of dollars.
Now, you talk a little bit about lensology and lenses. Can you just tell for filmmakers who don't understand lenses, what are the basic lenses they need to understand? And instead of having to know all lenses and everything about lenses, what are those like core lenses that you need to understand?
Well, okay, there's 3 lenses that you need to understand. And if you understand the difference between these 3 lenses, you basically understand the difference between all lenses. And that is, you have the normal lens, which is the 50 millimeter lens, okay? And it's called the normal lens because it's the perspective of the 50 is the same as our eyes. And perspective means the rate that objects diminish in size as they recede into the distance.
Okay.
So that's how we judge distance, is the rate at which objects get smaller as they go out towards the vanishing point. So with a 50 millimeter lens, it's the same as with our eyes. The other 2 lenses are the 10 millimeter lens, which is the extreme wide angle lens, and the extreme telephoto lens, which is like 100 or 150 or 200. Now, the difference there is the main difference is in the perspective, which is with a 10 millimeter lens, objects get smaller as they go into the distance much, much faster. They diminish in size very rapidly. And so what happens is that the depth and distance is vastly increased. It's objects, things that to our eye might look a certain distance, when seen through the wide angle lens, look much further away. And with the telephoto, the 200 or the 300, it's the exact opposite. The telescopic the objects do not diminish in size rapidly as they go towards the vanishing point. Because of the telescopic properties of the lens, objects which are far away look bigger than they do to our eye, and because of that, they seem to be closer to us.
So when, I saw Robert Rodriguez do that tip once. Is if there's a truck or a car coming to hit somebody, and it was a little kid in the middle of the road, and a big truck was coming, and Antonio Banderas jumped over and grabbed him. It looked super dangerous, but actually the truck was probably easily 400, 500, 600 feet back when he grabbed the kid, but it looked like he was right on top of it, and that was used with a telephoto lens. Yeah, the telephoto lens can be used to again, make misses where something's going to miss something. It look like a hit because it compresses space and makes things look closer together than art. But again, it's like the 50, the 10, the 300, 200. It's like if you understand the difference between the 50 and the 10, every other lens in between a 50 and a 10 does the same thing except less so. And the same thing, every lens between the 50 and the 300 does the same thing except less so. Fair enough. Now, What is your favorite action sequence and why?
What is my favorite action scene? Oh wow. Well, there's a lot of them. It's sort of I can't.
Pick one. Just pick one. Pick one that comes to your mind. You're like, well, that was a really great action sequence.
Well, there's the Bond films. The Bond films really kind of knock it out of the park every time, because they always, every Bond movie does something where it just hasn't been done before.
Like Casino Royale's was amazing.
Yeah,
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
Casino Royale, that's exactly what I'm thinking of. I mean, it's they really go all out to do most of the stunts that everybody else. Most stunts have been done 100 times or 1,000 times.
Right.
But in Casino Royale, is that where he jumps off the crane?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, that's just like a mind-bogglingly difficult stunt, and you just, it distinguishes itself by being something you haven't seen done before.
Got it. Now, if you were going to give advice to a filmmaker just starting out today, what would that be?
Get hold of a good script, and make it. Go out with a DSLR and 10 of your friends and shoot a feature. But because you can do it, if it didn't use, when I was coming up, you had to have 35 millimeter cameras.
Oh yeah.
And dollies and all that. And now, you can handhold the whole thing. I mean, City of God,
great movie,
amazing movie, was made, with non-actors, all handheld. There's other movies that, other examples like that. The one that I love is In the Company of Men, which was Neil LaBoute's first film, because he's a great writer. And so he sat down and wrote the script, and it was all just people talking in rooms. But the bottom line is that, the technology is no longer a barrier. You can make a movie that can be projected in a theater with a 7D and 15 of your friends if they have the skills. And a lot of young people have the skills. If they have the skills, and they'll give you 3 weeks of their time, all you need is the script and the actors. Now that's
it's a little that's a little sticking point, but
but it's true. It's true that's or if you can't make a feature, you come up with a short. And make it and put it up on YouTube. There are brilliant little shorts which showcase the skills of their. I mean, the movie that I think of is that movie called Lunch Date, which was made by some NYU students back in the 1990s or something, or maybe earlier. But just like it's a black and white, and there's like. It's 5 minutes or 10 minutes long, and there's like 5 or 6 lines of dialogue in it, which were non-sync.
Of course, it was all ADR, right?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, exactly. But it's the thing that you've got to do is get the script, and don't fool yourself in thinking that you can generate the script, because I mean that's one thing I learned with Phil Hartman, working with Phil Hartman, which was. So that was a comedy, right? The movie that I wrote Hartman wrote, and I was going to direct it, and Zemeckis was going to produce it, was a comedy. And it was funny because Hartman, when we started to write the script, first we had to redo the story, redo the ending for Zemeckis. And Hartman and I, it took us about a year to do that. And both of us he was about as good as I was in figuring out story. But then when it came to actually, Zemeckis said, okay, that's good. That's the ending. Go write it. Well, we went to go write it. Hartman said, okay, you sit at the computer. And I said, well, okay, we'll take turns. So I sat down at the computer, and he stood up and first thing he says, okay, he comes in the door and he says, and then she says, and he says, and he's just acting out the parts because he's an improv actor.
He's a
right?
He was a master. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm writing it down as fast as I can. And I just like, because everything is brilliant and funny. And I went home that night and I said, Gil, if you ever try to write something that's supposed to be funny by yourself, again, you're a fool because you need talent to do that. That guy's got talent,
Right.
You're not in the ballpark. He can write more funny lines in 30 seconds without stopping to think than you can write in 30 years.
Right. Right.
So and actually, again, the comedy is most American movies aren't. You don't very rarely in this country see a dramatic film with a downer ending, or with any kind of serious tragic ending. We don't make movies like that in this country. All of our movies, even our art films made by the Coen brothers or or Paul Thomas Anderson, these guys are very witty. They're very witty.
There's some comic in elements in almost all of them, right?
Yeah.
Now, what is? Now I'm going to ask you my Oprah Winfrey questions. So prepare yourself. What is the lesson that took you the longest to learn in the film business or in life?
Don't be the only person in the room who can have a good idea.
Great answer.
The guy who's sweeping the floor can have a great idea. And so don't listen. Surround yourself with creative people and then give them all the rope in the world to hang themselves with. And don't just think because the guy is the camera operator or the grip that he can't come up with a good idea,
right.
Because you're standing there. Directors are problem solvers. You're on the set. It's chaos, and you're trying to solve problems. The likelihood that if you think 30 people, you're much more likely to solve the problem than if everything has to be solved by you.
Yeah, and that takes an ego that can handle that, and that's something that a lot of filmmakers have problems with.
Yeah, when you start out thinking you know everything, and only the film is sort of like your temple. You build your little temple around it, and only you know how to make it.
There's a lot of guys that can.
Yeah, but just. Yeah, it's just be humble, I always say to the crew and everybody, I want everybody to give me their ideas. I want everybody, I'm trying to solve a problem and you have a solution, I want to hear your solution, but I reserve the right to say no without an explanation.
Yeah, because you're basically the gatekeeper of what happens.
Also time and money.
Mm-hmm.
You just can't go run around being super polite to everybody,
Yeah, that's something I learned along the way as well as a director. Is like, you can't. It's just you don't have the time and the budget's ticking away.
But if you listen and then say no, I'm sorry. That at least you've kept the option open for inspiration on the part of somebody else to guide you.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Now, what are 3 of your favorite films of all time? And I won't hold you to the list, just 3 films that come to your mind.
Well, I love The Godfather. I think that's The Godfather 1 is, genius film. I also love Sunset Boulevard. I think Billy Wilder is a genius, and that movie is, that movie is like the movie that I wanted to make with Zemeckis and Hartman. It's dark, it's weird, and it's unique. There's no movie around that's that strange,
Right.
And then I like, I guess I have a taste. The movie that was made most recently that I think is brilliant. Well, there's really 2. One is A Separation, which won the Oscar for the best foreign film about 3-4 years ago. It was made by an Iranian director. His name is Ashghar Fahardi. I just think that's a fabulous film. But just it's, it does a lot of things, and it's a low budget movie. It's an arty movie, and Farhadi is really an amazing director and writer. Yeah.
Now, we obviously the way I met you is through your course that we released called Hollywood Film and Television Directing Masterclass, and we will be putting direct links to that class and your books as well. Can you talk real quickly about the two books you have?
I got a book called First Time Director, which I wrote in 2003.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
Came out in 2003. It's basically what a first-time director needs to know when he goes to make his first film, because it's kind of a unique situation where you're going to always be a day late and a dollar short. You're going to have to be sort of proving yourself. You're not a proven entity yet. So there's a kind of it's everything pre-production, production, post-production. And then the other one is directing the camera, which came out in 2013. And that's basically, what a director needs to know to control the look of the film. And it's divided into basically two sections. One is how to shoot action sequences, which is something that, the look of the film is everything when you're shooting action. And number two is how to shoot dialogue scenes with a moving camera, which is tricky, but something you need to learn how to do if your movies are going to have the look of contemporary films. And
you go over a lot of that stuff in the online course as well, correct?
Yeah, that directing the camera is what the online course is about. It divides itself into two pieces. One is shooting action. The other one is shooting dialogue scenes with a moving camera.
And if you can master those two, you could be a working director.
Yeah. No, that's it. I mean, no, those are the two most important skills you need to know if you're working on a major studio movie. Because on the studio movie, the actors direct themselves. That's the dirty little secret. That that's what Zemeckis can say. When I want an actor to be happy, I tell him to be happy. And
right, because he's also working with the top actors in the world.
Yeah.
I doubt that he's sitting there with Tom Hanks or Denzel Washington, trying to get into the emotion of the scene.
Yeah. You don't do it. But so if you're working low budget, you need to direct actors. But if you're working low budget, you also need to control the look of the film, because that's not easily done, and you don't want to hand that over to the cinematographer, because then the film won't be yours.
Right. And you need to be known as a director who can control the visual look of their vision.
Yeah, exactly.
Gil, man, thank you so much for taking the time out to be on the show, man. You've dropped some major knowledge bombs for the Indie Film Hustle Tribe, so I truly, truly appreciate it, man. Thank you.
My pleasure.
As promised, that was an insane episode. I've learned so much from taking Gil's course, and I've actually read the Directing the Camera book, which is pretty much a lot of the stuff that you're going to learn in the course, but goes into a little bit more detail about it. So if you guys are interested in taking this course, by the way, when I launched it, it is probably one of the most successful course launches that we've ever done at Indie Film Hustle. That's how popular it's become, and that's how insane people are going over it. Really, really love it. It's just really great information, and I can't recommend it more highly. So if you guys want to get 50% off the course for a limited time, head over to indiefilmhustle.com/Hollywood directing. That's indiefilmhustle.com/Hollywood directing. And you'll get actually over 50% off the course, which I think is standing right now at $29. So worth it, guys. I can't even express to you how awesome this course is and how in love I am with it. So definitely check it out. And if you want to get links to anything we discussed in the episode, head over to indiefilmhustle.com/156. That's indiefilmhustle.com/156. And if you guys get an opportunity, head over to filmmakingpodcast.com and leave us a good review, hopefully, on iTunes. It really helps the show out a lot. I really, really appreciate it. So as always, keep that hustle going, keep that dream alive, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Indie Film Hustle podcast at indiefilmhustle.com. That's INDIEFILMHUSTLE.com.